Hey everyone and welcome back to the channel. In today's episode we will be continuing to generate the environment and we will be starting up with the ground. Alright, for the terrain I have created textures using the Quixel Mixer, which is actually a software where it can combine different maps together based on height values, and it creates you a map for that. So these are 8K textures because I have a very big environment, so I haven't tested it yet, so let's just see if it actually does hold up. I'm not so convinced, but we will see how it will look. Displacement shader, no shading engine. The one float value goes into displacement, and this one goes there. Roughness will get a range, AI range, just to be able to control the roughness at some point. And we output the float value to specular roughness. We create an AI, a bump2d node, switch it over to be a tangent space, connect the red channel to the bump2d node and back to the normal camera. And AI color correct, which is maybe not needed because I checked the textures already, but let's just hook it up and connect this to the base color. Hit save, change the shader name to terrain, and let's assign it and see what we get. The input should be, yeah, they are on raw. Let's see if it works. So surprisingly good, I would say. It holds up pretty good based on what I provided, so I think we can actually work with that. So let's see how the displacement works. So currently we don't have much subdivisions for anything to happen. So let's just add a subdivision of Cat Clark and just check the wireframe. So this is the current wireframe. So just add 2 subdivisions here. It might take a while to subdivide this. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, let's just for now keep it at 1. It takes a bit too long to work. So maybe for the final render I go up this additional step. Let's just check the displacement settings. So opening the hypershade, going over to the displacement shader, and let's see what we got here. So let's just change the 0 value to 0.5, which would update the scene. So we should have a different value now. So let's increase the value maybe to 4. So 4x the displacement. Yeah, so this is looking a lot better now. Just because it's also a bump multiplier. So overall it gets a way more structure on the whole thing. And I think this might just work. So obviously the roughness, we need to play around with that. It's very shiny. So that's why I brought in the range. So if I check in the isolate node, you will see what we got here. It's pretty shiny, so let's just make it a bit more rough. So the input max, so now we have values ranging. We need to clamp it, smooth step clamp, so values don't go higher than 1, and we don't actually want values which are higher than 1. We just want to bring in the lows, which is very rough now. So I think this might just work. And just to make it work a bit nicer, I think I will just plug in an AI noise into the normal map right here. I think we can combine them. If I plug this into the bump2d, let's just stop the render for now. I'm not actually sure if this works with normal maps, but I just want to combine two bump maps. So the out normal from the bump2d node should go into the normal camera from this guy, which I can't seem to find. Oh, that's a texture. I need to plug it into this guy, sorry. So show all, and this should go into the normal camera. There we go. So, and this is the red channel, goes in here. So now I should have been able to stack those normal maps together. Let's see if it worked. So something did work. That's cool. So we can see there's way more detail now on the floor. This is just because I combined those two maps together. So if I just control the strength of this now, I can add this detail in. So I think it works already pretty good on the more or less default values. So this would be my ground terrain. There is some variation in it. You can see some scattered leaves. It's not perfect, but I think this will hold up for what I'm trying to do here. So if I unhide the stones and the clovers and the leaves, and I bring back the tree trunk, which should be this guy. Come on. There we go. Hit save, and let's just see what we get. Alright, obviously the clover fields are way too saturated, but I think the stones work pretty well. They blend in pretty nicely. And the leaves, we need to scatter a lot more of those, but I think they are also a bit too bright for this environment. But all in all, you can see how it's working, and just with those simple steps, it seems to kind of work. So let's just add the last materials. Like I've got the fern and the stem, so I'll be doing that just now. So I just brought in my higher quality geometry for the ferns, which are these guys. So this is my proxy, and these are actually the higher detail ones. So in the hypershade, let me just bring in the textures, and then we get going with look deving them quickly. Alright, so these are the textures. Let's create the shader, standard surface shader, and let's connect them up to those variations and call this AI fern. Let's hook these guys up, and this time, because it will be scattering them, I will create the jitter node as well. So jitter for all three guys. So this will be fern base color, and the order is not right, but doesn't matter. Fern roughness and opacity. Opacity won't get a jitter. So let's connect the out color from the opacity, connect the albedo to the base color and the roughness into the roughness, and then hook them up to the shader. So roughness red goes to spec roughness, and fern color, we want to have them translucent, right? So we will be ignoring the base color. We will be creating a transmissive surface. So this will go into the color, and I will be duplicating, no, I won't be duplicating, I will be creating a color correct node after, and the color correct node will go into the radius. So let's hook this up, and I will explain you in a second why. And then in the shader, let's enable the weight. Sorry for going so fast, but I just don't bore you guys with assigning shaders and doing material changes. So obviously you can always go back in time, pause it, and check it out again. So let's hide the proxies, and let's move the other guys just a bit more apart so we can actually see what's going on. And to make this work, let's just go to light shader, attribute control, change the mesh, and everyone opaque off. Obviously you can do it manually by clicking through each shape and changing this attribute. Let's save and hit render and see what we get. If we look through the perspective, and this is what we currently get. I think this works already surprisingly well. So these textures again come from Quixel Megascans, and it's very simple. It's the opacity that does most of the work. So I'm just connecting these guys up, and let's check the albedo. I'm not sure. Oh, because I don't have that currently connected. So let's just connect this for now to the base color, just so that we get something in the AUV. Why is this not outputting? Is that because the weight is fully on? Yeah, okay. So this is currently the setup, and I just want to create this jitter node. So I want to maybe change a bit of the hue, like a negative hue shift. Oh, that's a procedural one. We need to do it in the object. So now we get a warmer fern. It should be very solid. It shouldn't go too crazy, and maybe a value of 2 in the positive side. And let's try to is that actually working? If will this desaturate? No, it will also saturate. So I think we need to go negative here to desaturate them a bit, and maybe just go up 0.1, 0.01 in saturation. And the same for the roughness. Let's first see how the roughness looks like in the isolate mode. So it is fairly rough. So let's just bring in some jitter here as well. So let's make them a bit darker, like so, and some a bit brighter. So this is just a randomization in general. You can also play with ranges to definitely add more detail to it. But I think for now, this will work pretty cool. Let's just switch back the scattering. So I'll disable the diffuse and just bring in the weight of the scattering, and you can now see how the light walks through the object. IOR for the spec, we can go to maybe 1.4. In this case, we don't need to change the modes to random walk. I think it will be, I'm not sure if there's a big difference. I'm not sure about render time as well, so it doesn't really matter. You can also use the geometry thin walled, and you should get a lot faster renders. But I'm afraid that the transmission won't be as nice. As you can see, it's a lot more detailed. Okay, so these objects are now my high-res ones, and I just want to change the transforms back to 0. Oh, not the rotation, just the translations. And then I want to make sure that I freeze those transformations, like so, saving. And now I'm heading over to the instancer of the ferns, which currently still have my proxies, right? So I'm selecting these guys and I'm removing these items, so that currently it's empty. I'm just copying the tab so I can actually use it. So it's the same instance as in the attribute editor, just a copied window. So now I can select my high quality proxies or my LODs and add selection. So now these guys are in here, and now they should be instanced. So let's see if this actually did work. If I unhide the fern instancer, and now we get all these ferns scattered throughout the scene. So let's see the main camera. It looks like a lot of fern. I guess we need to adjust this, but let's bring in the terrain first and hit the render button and see what we get right now. So as you can see, it works pretty good. So it might be they are too small for the scene scale, but you can see the randomization if you don't have albedo anyways. But I think this works. You get these nice speck hits, you get them scattered everywhere. So let's just unhide all the rest and render it. Alright, so this is now the scene with all the current instances unhidden, and you can see the fern scale is a lot smaller than it should be. You can see those clovers are like this high, and the fern is almost the same height. So we would need to work on the mesh node to make them a lot bigger, and we will do that in a second. I'll just want to add those trees in now to get something more interesting in the scene. Right, so I brought in the speed tree objects. Like I've got 5 different trees now, and they will all share the same shader, but they will all be randomized using the jitter color. So while exporting them from SpeedTree, I made sure that I was exporting the leaves as variations, so they are actually different objects on its own. So I have I'm not sure if this is anything. I don't think so. Oh, it is one. So you can see I've got these objects and the rest is one. So these 4 are all the leaves, and for each tree I have the same setup. So I'm selecting now all the leaves itself, like this, and then I am assigning a standard surface shader, and in the hypershade I will connect up the proper textures to that. So let's load this guy up, takes a while, and let's just frame this. So this is now my shader, and now let me bring in those textures. Alright, I also directly imported the trunk textures, so I've got these guys for the tree trunk and then these three for the leaves alone. So again, to get this working, I first need to plug in the opacity to the opacity slot, and then my leaf base color will get a jitter color. This will connect into the input and the out goes into the base. No, let's plug it into subsurface color and do the same trick as we did with the ferns. So this time I'll create a color correct node, and the out from the jitter goes in the input here, and this connects to the radius. And then the only thing left to do is plug in the gloss map, which is, I think we can just use that as a roughness map. So let's just use a jitter as well, connect this up, and then a range as well if you need more control after. So let's plug this in here, and the out red channel goes into specular roughness. So this should be all for the setup for the leaves. And the only thing which I need to do is make sure that each leaf has opacity or has this opaque toggle disabled. So I'm selecting all the objects, which I did now, and then I'm going into the light shader light attribute control and make sure I select only the shapes and go into the mesh and disable opaque off. So you can do it manually, clicking through each node, going to Arnold tab and toggling this button. So the script does that for me. So now we have that connected. Let's just hit render and see what we get on the adult tree. So starting up the render. So currently this is what we get on the default shader. Because we connected it to the subsurface slot and instead of the diffuse we see white leaves. So let's introduce the subsurface scattering. So now we get the tree color, the leaf color properly displayed on this large tree. And now let's change the diffuse. Oh, again, the same problem. Let's just go to the jitter and play around with some of those values. Let's play with the hue. Let's try a negative value so we get some color variations in there, and maybe positive 0.25 or 0.5 just to get some random colors in here. And for now, this is all I want to do. So, and now I want to connect the trunk shader. So the trunks are here. And now let's see. I think the trunk is just this guy. Yeah, so in all of these groups, you just select the trunk like this, and then I assign a new shader. Standard surface, there we go. And for now, I'll just plug those in as they are. So this is a bump 2D. Hook this up. You see the process is now repetitive, is always the same, so I'm really going fast to don't bore you guys with this setup. So this connects in the range, and the range is the roughness, so this will go into the spec roughness, and the trunk will go into the base color, but I want to also randomize this as well, so it will get a jitter, AI jitter. Oh, it's not, it's AI color jitter. So this one connects to the base color instead. All right, so this is hooked up and all the shaders are assigned. So let me just fix up the orientations for those trees. And then I think we should be ready to actually instance those high quality trees. So currently you can see that my scale is totally off. So this box is my human, which is 2 meters high, 200 centimeters high. So my trees are actually not to scale. So if I would move this tree, why can't I snap it there? Maybe because it's a curve. So anyways, if I bring it online with the bounding box of my human, like this, you can see it's definitely not the right scale. So let's just bring this up. So if this is a human and this is an adult tree, I think something like this is more feasible. So it's 3 times bigger. I'm not sure exactly what what's translation scale this is, but I think this should work if I have a value on 3. Let's just do maybe 3.5. So this might be pretty good. So let's just bring it back to the origin, and now just scale the other trees so it's kind of matching. So this is the big one, so this would be a younger tree. The child one will be maybe, let's just hide the adult. The child tree is a bit smaller, like this. And then we have the baby tree, which is a very small one. Maybe just scale it a bit like this. And then we have a baby tree, which is very small, which will be maybe something like this. Okay, so for all those trees, I will make sure I freeze all the transformations. Modify, freeze transformations. And I hope this should do the trick. So before we instance the trees, I just wanna change a mode from level of detail to bounding box, like a total bounding box, because I'm afraid that it will be a lot of geometry being instanced. So for now I'm just removing that, and you can see currently my proxy geometry is still in the instances, so I will just remove them, and then I will select them by age, so born, baby, child, young, and adult, and add those to the selection so the order is the same. So now they should be actually being scattered. And let's just save the scene and bring in the terrain and the trees and see if it actually does work. So tree instancer. So something has happened, and let's just maybe change a mode to bounding boxes for each tree and see if they are being scattered. I'm not sure, so let's investigate. Alright, so it actually does work. They are being scattered. I did not change anything. I just started the render from perspective mode, and you can see they are being scattered. They are not visible in the viewport, so I need to see if I can make them visible. But as you can see right now, it's a lot of trees on this little patch, and you can actually see the smaller ones being there, and then we have the big ones in the center. So all in all, it works as I expect it to work. So let's jump to the main camera, and now you can see that we have a lot of trees in here, so we will definitely need to work on that. So let's check what we can do. So as expected, I had a few crashes, but I think I'm back on track. I have removed the big adult tree because this geometry is very heavy. So currently I am just playing around with the mesh editor and trying to reposition or redial in some values here. So in the instance I have currently just 3 objects, and I have changed the age of the ecosystem to 60, and each tree has a max age of 50. So it means more or less we will have only the biggest trees in the scene, but let's just put this to 60 and see what we get. So now we see a lot more smaller trees as well. And I think the sparsity of that forest is a lot better than it actually was before. So the only thing which I need to do now is to add the avoidance map back in, so we don't actually get any trees right here. So, oh, and you can see we have a few of the big trees. These ones here are the old trees. You can see they have a bit different model detail. So let's just go into the world node again and go to avoidance and bring in the avoidance mesh. I think I should have it here. So let's drop that in, and you can already see that there's less trees growing in the center. So I just need to adjust the values a bit more using the ramp in here to define the absolute kill radius. So, and I think I need to change the radius maybe to 50 units, There you go. So now everything outside this circle is being dyed off. So, and this ramp controls how quick they kind of are being killed off. So now we have a few sparse trees here, but most of the time there's nothing. So if I hide the avoidance map, you can see it gets pretty sparse here. And because I used the placer node to place the trees more manual, I have a lot less trees and the scene is more interactive to work with. So unfortunately, because of the crash, my shader assignments were not saved because I could not recover the scene somehow. So I'm just quickly reassigning those shaders and creating the jitter colors, and then I'll be back. Alright, so now I have the shaders connected, and the only thing which I need to do now is dial the jitter color nodes, which I haven't done yet. So I just want to do that together with you. So let's just jitter the leaves and let's just add maybe a negative gain on the objects. Not as crazy. And let's add some hue max as well, so we get a bit different greens, and add more saturation maybe, and a bit gain so they get a bit darker. So now you can see we have a nice randomization for the leaves, and let's do the kind of the same thing for the tree trunk jitter, and just change for this the gain, so we have darker trees and like tree trunks and a bit lighter ones. And I guess this should be it for the randomization of those trees, and you can see it's working out pretty good. And if I switch over to my main camera, they are currently pretty far away, and the beauty looks pretty fine, I think. So the only thing which we got to do now is scatter them, so we have a better density in the depth of the image. Alright, so from the top down you can see where my main action is if I unhide the trunk, which is this main guy. So this is the main area of interest. So now we can actually bring in, we can increase the density, and we do that in the tree node and in the world. If I find the world node up here, there it is. We will change the ecosystem age maybe to 50, and you shall see that we get more and more trees being seeded and grown. So let's try 55 years, and you can see in the viewport how the trees are growing. And we get also these baby ones because I have different seeds for the different ages of those trees. So let's try 60. And I think this is now pretty dense, and currently they are not being scattered around here because I have this avoidance object, which is right here. So what I'm trying to do now is to just move that object, it's selected but hidden, and just move the whole thing a bit backwards, so we get more trees creeping up on the border of this environment. So if I look back through my main camera, you can see that we got those trees now in the background, and for me they feel a bit small. So what I will be doing now, I'll be just scaling those trees up by a factor. So let's try a factor. I'm actually changing the instance proxy, so a factor by 1.25, 1.5. So now we have a bit larger trees, and they are a bit uniform, but I think the overall effect works still pretty good. So if I now save the scene and unhide the leaves for now, and I just wanted to add more scatter to those leaves, right? So currently let's just bring in the mesh editor just so that I see what I have. And for the tree, for the leaves, we have a placer and a randomizer. So I'm actually painting where I want to have more leaves. So let's just paint a few more. If I go into the perspective camera, I have the control to change the scatter density to have a lot more leaves being painted. So you can see they are being scattered, and I just want to have a lot more, so you can see how they are being distributed. Let's just paint them also a bit in the forest itself. Change the scatter density to maybe 20, so we should get now a lot more leaves. And you can see it's hardly visible through the wireframe of the trees, but in the front area you should see a lot more being scattered. So this looks a lot better. So let's just try to scatter a bit more in the background. I'm just hiding the trees for now, so we can actually place a few more in the far background here, and you can see how easy it is to scatter objects around. And now I also wanted to fix the scaling issue of the ferns, because they are very small compared to the rest of the scene. So to do so, I will just need to change, just scale up the original assets like I just did with the trees. So if I think these LODs should be the ferns, and if I scale these guys up, we should get a lot larger ones. So obviously this is now scattering a lot, so we need to see if we can just actually do it a bit more careful. So I'm just changing the age of the ecosystem as well. So this might actually work. We just need to see how it renders. So let's just start the render and see how the ferns are being scattered. And I think this works pretty good. It's nothing too spectacular, but you can see how it's being scattered, and it doesn't look too populated, and it may be a bit too saturated, but overall I think it should work. So what I'm doing now, I will be changing the type for each instance set to just be bounding box, so we don't get a laggy viewport and Maya can handle it. So as you see, I'm changing all the ones to bounding box, and then I'm unhiding them. The same goes for the trees. So you shouldn't see any big difference in the viewport, but if I hit the render button, we should see all the geometry being scattered. So bringing up the render view, you should now see all the assets being scattered. So again, this tutorial is not based on making a really beautiful image. It should just show you how to create these big landscape scenes at an ease with using this technology, using Mesh. And you can already see it's scattering quite a bit there in the back. So we have lots of trees. I might actually dial down the age or the sparsity so we can actually get more light through those trees. Let's just do that quickly. So I'm going back to the world node, tree node, and I think we should be able to handle those instances in the viewport. So I'm bringing back the geometry, and because the leaves are so thick, I will be just reducing or trying to reduce the sparsity first in the ecosystem. Just try maybe 2000. So I think we got a bit less trees in here. So let's try 3000. Yeah, so this might be a bit too much, but we shall see how it looks. So this is now with a less dense forest, and now you can actually see the light being scattered through, and it looks more or less like a nice little forest scene. Obviously we could have a bit more scattering or trees here in the background, but all in all this works pretty nice. So let's just change the shader for the clover. Let's see if I can actually bring it up. AI clover, there it is. So if I just focus on this area there, and I'll go into the shader of the clover color, and I'll be just changing the saturation because I increased it quite a lot. So let's just go back to the default of 0. Now you can see it's more desaturated, but I think the gain is way too much. It's way too bright. So I'm just going down a few stops in the gain, and I will be reducing the gain max to maybe 0.15, and we should have a lot darker ones. So this might actually work. I think this is actually pretty good. So what else can we do? I think for the trees currently, they don't have scattering enabled. So I'll be just going to one of those leaf shaders and make sure that instead of using diffuse, I'll go into subsurface and bring in the weight. So now we should have a fully scattered shader, and you can see the leaves look a lot better because they are scattering the light now properly through those leaves. And I think now again we can increase the density of the forest, so we have a bit more trees again, and then this should sum up the tutorial. Obviously we can play around with depth of field to make this still a bit a bit nicer. But overall, this should sum it up. So let's just head over to the world node again and reduce the sparsity to maybe 1.5, 1500. So now again, we have more trees in here. And if we check from the perspective mode camera, we only have trees around there. And I think my sun direction is coming from here. So we don't really get nice shadows being cast here. So if you want to have that, you can try a placer node after. So if we create, go to the mesh editor, it's just easier to do it in here. And go to here and create another placer node on top, which is on top of the world. And then you can just add a tree and maybe place it there. This is now the baby one. So I think we can actually paint a specific ID, fixed ID, paint ID. Let's try 1, 2, maybe 3. I think it exists. Maybe it doesn't. Let's try 2 then. Not sure. Maybe this doesn't work as I thought it would. It was on random, I think. No, I broke it. Let's try again. First add the terrain here. Not sure why I can't place them now. I just updated the attribute editor, now it works. So now I can actually paint a fixed ID, which is number 2, and I can click now and it will actually paint me those trees where I want them to be. So this is a very convenient way to really paint trees where you really want to see them. And it seems it's now again not working anymore. So let's try this again. There we go. So it's a bit buggy obviously, but now I can really artistically control where I want to see some trees. So let's bring in one here maybe, and another one there, so we get closer leaves. If I bring one here, we get a cast shadow. So I think this is pretty cool. So let's save this up and render an image. So after increasing the render settings, I finally got the result back. So this is what I got. It's obviously not perfect, but it works quite good with all the things I added. So we've got the random ferns. We have those leaves which don't look as good, but then we have the trees in the back. We have these little clovers. I added another tree in the background, foreground, and before I submitted the render, actually I output all the AUVs which I needed. So in my render settings, I created all these AUVs as well, and also the Cryptomatte stuff. If you check my previous series about Cryptomatte, you will see how to set it up and get it to work. And the benefit of that is now when I'm in Nuke, I can actually generate masks for any object which I want to control that settings. So let's say I want to select this leaf right there. In my Cryptomatte objects, I can now actually visualize it. I hope so. I think it must be this guy, or maybe this one. So if I choose a color picker, unfortunately, let me just fix my viewport again so you can actually see what I'm talking about. So here are my AOVs at the bottom. So if I look through the Cryptomatte node and I control click on this leaf, I should be able to generate a matte for just that. And in my beauty output, so let's just move this node down, check my output, and now I can just do maybe a hue shift or whatever I want to do. So if I select it and just the matte for this, I can just do a hue rotation, and we should see, hopefully, an updated leaf. So there you see, if I change the rotation, you can see I can now only adjust this little leaf. I can change the saturation on that guy, and this is the power of Cryptomatte, which is pretty awesome. And you can also do like materials. So if I want to change all the shaders, like the colors of all the leaves, there's a crypto material object as well. So let's see if I can get this to work. So but you can see all the leaves are blue now and all the ferns are this color, and so it's all pretty straightforward. So let me just select this blue leaf, and all the leaves are selected. And what I want to do is, let's just add a grade node, or yeah, just add a grade node to these guys. Connect this up and to the Cryptomatte object, and let's see what we can do with that. So now I have the power to just control the leaves itself. So now I can just gain them up or change their color altogether, like more cooler leaves or whatever. So this is the flexibility you get by that. And again, this is the final output which I will be providing. Unfortunately, I cannot provide you all the scene stuff because these assets I bought them using Quixel Megascans, but I hope you learn a lot from the technique I used to create this pretty cool looking render with some depth of field effect. Obviously there's still a bit of noise in there, but overall I must say it's actually a pretty good result for the time I spent on this. And imagine what you guys could do if you really spend some time for your demo reel or just a personal project. I guess you can create pretty stunning stuff if you spend more time and don't have these simple assets which I currently have. So thank you guys for tuning in, and I hope it's okay that the tutorial is like 1 hour 10 minutes long. Essentially I might split it up, so I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for tuning in, and obviously I see you in the next tutorial.